Thanks for having me on, guys. I mean, it was great to see Conor McGregor had watched one of your episodes and given you a bit of a
Yeah,
boost as well. It's just
yeah,
Yeah, it was a bit of a
must be a
strange
great
one.
feeling.
that's
Yeah,
interesting.
I think
What
Con-
else does Conor McGregor do but watch some Ep21 videos on a Saturday? It was a Saturday. He was analyzing, so yeah, it was interesting.
Connor's still a little bit lost in the wilderness of crypto and Bitcoin, so it's trying to get that drilled home, which could probably take a little time. But obviously, we can share your video, and hopefully, you can watch that because that's the main thing.
Honestly, like if we can get him to watch that video,
Hmm.
it will hopefully crystallize in his mind why Bitcoin is so important. And if we can get him to share that video with Ireland,
Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone will then understand, and then he can be voted in.
yeah,
Well, like again, that's the context of this episode. This is our 21st episode, which is in alignment with the video, with the context of the subject we're talking around here. But today, it's a pleasure to have Joe Bryan on this podcast. Joe's just back from Vegas, so you're at the Bitcoin conference last week. So I'm sure you have a lot of things to take in and take back from there. But Joe, thanks for coming on here. Really appreciate your time. I suppose for our viewers, for our listeners, could you kind of break down a little bit? Well, I suppose about a little bit about your background, like what led you to Bitcoin initially, and then what really made you create this video? What was the main initial or incentive to go and create this for people to get this resource out in the public domain?
Okay, well, Alan, Chris, thanks ever so much for having me on. Um, I appreciate the offer to come on, especially for the 21st episode. It's very nice. Um, yeah, I've been blown away by the reception for what's the problem. It seems to tap into that thing that people know is wrong. They can't put the finger on it, and just connecting the dots for people. I mean, there's nothing in that video if you're a hardened Bitcoiner you didn't know, but the way that it's delivered in a story form and building up from first principles without even talking about Bitcoin until right at the end sort of delivers the message, I think a way that is fairly unique. Um, I mean, I created a video because I created a presentation for some friends to explain, to try and help them understand why Bitcoin was important without assuming any knowledge. And so I wanted within half an hour to get anybody from zero to wanting to learn about Bitcoin after 30 minutes. That was the target for this. And along the way, give them a skeletal mental framework for understanding how Bitcoin works without it being explicitly Bitcoin, how a free market works, what happens when you don't have sound money. And what happens when you don't have sound money is you end up with a world like today.
Mm.
And so all the issues that we have in the world today are a downstream impact from the fact that a big red button exists that allows the government to change the money whenever they want. And that means printing more money. And it means changing the censorship resistant nature of the money. We've never had censorship resistant money, but if you start from the first principles of what perfect money looks like, and then you compromise on those characteristics, you end up with today. But Bitcoin is that perfect money. We don't have to compromise. We're at the point in history for the very first time we actually have the ability to separate money and state in a way that we have never done before. And yeah, I'm delighted that the video has been so popular, and I met lots of people in Las Vegas who were, came and said, I love the video. Thanks very much for making it, and it's just amazing, absolutely amazing.
yeah.
I think sorry, Chris. I just say it's probably like there's a lot. It's probably the missing puzzle piece for many people. As Bitcoiners, we always have that issue with family members, friends, trying to break down the problem. And it's just the way the video lays it out, even from the first couple of minutes, it captures your attention. It wants you to know more because it's sort of revealing things that people know there's an issue in the world. People know there's problems, cost of living, etc. But the video itself just really grasps your attention. So it sucks you in to want to know more. And it's identifying these problems that most people aren't aware of. And I think you were saying it's been shared millions of times across X, hundreds of thousands of times on YouTube. But it's just that resource I think that a lot of us are missing, and being able to just easily share that with family members, friends, other business owners, Conor McGregor potentially there as well. It's such a it's an amazing thing to create. And was it from just it's very different from the creative aspect. Do you think it is just the visuals, the storytelling? Is that the thing, the key thing that's missing for most of us? We try to educate people, talk to people about Bitcoin, but it's probably the presentation method. I think what you've done is really that bit that's been missing for many of us. Would you agree with that? Is that what's captured people
Yeah,
really?
I think the story mechanism,
Yeah,
because humans remember stories.
yeah,
Like if you hear a story once, you can remember the story and you can recount the story to someone else. If you sit in a presentation, then you might absorb it, you might not, but it doesn't have that sort of narrative arc. It doesn't have characters. It doesn't have those underlying principles that you work through yourself. So, when you watch the video, I don't make big leaps. I talk about, a basic setup, and then through some very small logical deductions or logical steps, the viewer says, well, of course that's true. Of course that's true. Of course that's how it works. Of course that's how it works. And they're all small steps, but when you put them all on top of each other, you end up in a wildly different place than where you started.
yeah,
And it's clear there is another route. And so, Bitcoin generally attracts people who are systems orientated, who have, structured backgrounds, either from, engineering or science or finance, because it's a very logical thing. It's like, if this, then this, if this, then this, those steps. But those steps compound. But if you don't come from a background like that and you just get to see the downstream impacts, and then what you see about Bitcoin from educational material is, all about the solution, then you just have a big disconnect. It's
yeah.
like there's this technology over here, and I see a list of problems. I don't connect the two of them as being related.
Hmm.
Whereas if
I
we
think
can
one of
build a
the
story, oh, sorry, Chris, go on.
no, 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 go ahead. Sorry. Sorry,
Whereas
Joe.
if we can build a story where up front in the story you are connecting people to their problems and saying these problems are because of the money, and then you take them on the journey from first principles to delivering, showing where those problems are coming from, and making it very clear it's because of the money. Then by going through that process, at every point they agree with every step. And so within 15 minutes, they understand today's problems are because the money's broken. And that's it.
Hmm.
But then they also see that there is an alternative. Right? So in their own mind, by the end of the story, after about 20 minutes, it's very clear to them they don't want to be on Fiatello's side of the island. They want to be on Satoshi's side of the island. Who would want to be on Fiatello's side of the island? Right? But then we link it back to today, and Fiatello's side of the island looks pretty good compared to where we are today. It's like we're a terrible version of Fiatello's side of the island. And so in their mind, they've already made it clear, arrived at the conclusion themselves that they don't want to even be on Fiatello's side of the island. So when you then start to reveal that Fiatello is so much better than what we have today, it just hammers home the point that, it's critical that we separate money and state, and we need to be on Satoshi's side of the island as quickly as possible. And it's not, you said that it's a sort of a missing piece, and I think it's the story, but it's connecting that. What's the problem? This is the entire title. Like, people don't recognize the solution unless they understand the problem, unless they connect it to a problem that impacts them. So, I think it just fills that small niche for getting someone to the starting line with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Is the thing that every Bitcoiner in the world can have in their pocket and just send to somebody. Right? Just watch that. And there's like no sharp edges.
Hmm.
It's so easy. Anyone can watch it. Anyone can understand it. It's there in multiple languages. And everyone recognizes the problems. And so it starts the conversation. And, there's been so many so many people came up and said, like, I shared it with my family. They finally get it. You know, my dad now asks me for Bitcoin videos and stuff like that. You know, like, because we hit people over the head with, you know, the Bitcoin stuff. It's you want them to pull, not for you to be pushing. And I think this just unlocks it. It doesn't unlock it for everybody, obviously, but for, you know, it seems to be pretty potent. I'm delighted.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I love the video, to be honest. Even from the start, I think one of the things that really resonated with me, and you said it at the start of this as well, was, you know, this presentation assumes no knowledge. And I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole reading, you know, every textbook I could get, and that's my kind of learning style. And then you try and relay that to other people, and it is tough. And it's kind of taking that step back just and starting from a different starting point and saying, look, this is the world that we're in. This is where we've gone to, and you don't even need to go too far back. Like, again, like a lot of Bitcoiners might even start back, you know, 5,000 years ago, where there was gold and things like that, and it doesn't even need to start there. And I think that's the beauty of the whole video and presentation. It's kind of that, you know, easy format. You know, it's a mix of animation, that camera voice that you have, the ease of music, and it just gets people to understand the problem, first of all, which is kind of what you need to outline before getting stuck into, here's Bitcoin, it's the best thing ever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big things about the video is it abstracts away a lot of stuff. Because as Bitcoiners, we tend to focus quite heavily on the monetary system, right? And it's complex. Yeah, and it's so complex that it's largely inaccessible for almost everybody. You need someone like Lynn Alden to come along and explain how it actually works, right? And then, you know, that's hard. That's hard. Whereas if you could just replace the entire thing with just a big red button, it's like that's easy for people to understand, right? The government have a big red button they can press whenever they want and print money. You don't have to understand how that mechanism works because it's super complicated and it's deliberately opaque. Right? Deliberately opaque. It's just easy. Just press a big red button. They just shouldn't have a big red button. Simple as that. Right? We take away the big red button, we fix the world. Like that is just so much simpler than, you know, trying to explain quantitative easing or, you know, all of the other shenanigans.
Yeah, I think as you say, it's simplifying everything for people. And the thing about it is, when you break it down like your video does, it is that simplistic. This is the problem. This is the solution. And people don't spend the time thinking, but again, it's a symptom of the Fiat world we live in, where people are struggling, they're working, they're struggling to put bread on the table. They're not having that time freedom to actually sit down and, you know, think about these things. Whereas having this bite-sized resource, you know, really kind of accelerates people's understanding of what the problem is. And it's a similar thing, as you said, like it's just sharing it with family members. At the first, from 2017, 2020 onwards, trying to talk about Bitcoin with friends and family was like a brick wall. There was people sniggering, laughing back at you. It's like, yeah, dismissing you for what you're saying. But now I'm actually getting people, and a main reason is from sharing the video, even people coming and asking me questions. So I'm at the point, and I think a lot of Bitcoiners are in a similar frame of mind, where it's at the point where we just wait for people to come and ask, because it's an easier conversation, it's a smoother conversation, and transition into understanding the solution, and then you can go down the rabbit hole with the person around Bitcoin. But you said something earlier on there again around about how bad things are now. Like it is the thing. People, I don't think people realize, and many business owners, like I'm a small business owner, I talk with business owners quite frequently, and they're struggling. So many business owners are really, really struggling. And I think it's worse now than it was even during COVID. And that was pretty bad. But it's like, how, on your point of view, how bad, or how would you sum up how bad things are at the moment with the state of the economy, with the state of the financial system, and then the knock-on effects of what it's going to cause for ourselves, but also our kids and our, you know, future generations if things don't change. You know, how bad is it, Joe, right now?
I mean, it's bad. It's bad. I mean, COVID was the game changer. Right? They just printed so much money and they destroyed so many businesses. It became very clear that there's a two-tier system. Right? You force all the small businesses to close, you leave the big businesses open. Right? This, you know, the government is a negative impact on everything, full stop. It destroys the free market. We don't live in a free market right now. And we certainly don't live in a free market for money. And so, a combination of rules and regulations with incessant money printing makes it ever harder for businesses, especially small businesses, because you don't have the resources to compete with the bigger businesses from a rules and regulations perspective. Because the law book is now this big and it gets constantly expanded needlessly. And your access to capital is limited. And your borrowing rates are higher because you're further from the money printer. And so everything's stacked against you. And they're printing money on top. Right? And they're printing money which is causing your cost base to constantly rise. And then so your margins are getting squeezed. And so every business is then faced with this, how do I protect this profit margin? How do I justify staying in existence? Well, I'll just close the business or go and work for someone else, and then you lose jobs. And the money printer just destroys everything. But we're at that point of it beginning to accelerate away. Because you can't. Every day you go out and the prices are high. And businesses put prices up like 10, 15%. It's not like 2% anymore. It's like monstrous changes. And, I really wonder how people are coping. And people having to take on more debt, which makes them more sort of, it's just more indebted and more stuck within the system. And so, Bitcoin has never been more important than it is today. But people finally have an opportunity to individually separate money and state. So you can opt out. You can opt out of the system and start saving in Bitcoin. And they can't print that. And ultimately they're going to have to buy that by printing money. So they're going to destroy the paper, destroy the purchasing power of the money even further once you reach a tipping point. And they're going to have to buy Bitcoin because it's the only way for them to recapitalize themselves. And so by buying Bitcoin, you're just getting ahead of the inevitable outcome, protecting you and protecting your family. So yeah, it's a tough time, and it's only going to get worse, I'm afraid. Because we have now from the level of distortion is reaching such a point where the political outcomes become super negative ones. Because if you think, well, what's happening? You're printing money, you're distorting the entire economy, you're causing a cascade of problems, which you then have to print more money to try and solve, which further exacerbates the problems and causes new ones. And all the time, the public have a hard time connecting the cause and effect. Tracking all the problems back to the fact that they just have a big red button is very hard. Unless you have a map to lay it out like the video. It's like once you see the video, you can't unsee it again. It's like, okay, well, I understand where all these things come from now. Just not enough people have seen the video. If everyone in the world saw the video, we'd be able to make a massive change, right? But while the majority of the world have not seen the video, they see all these downstream issues and they're constantly looking to the government to help them fix them or to save them from them when the government is the problem. The money printer is the problem. And so every step, the solution is always just more government. And when the solution is more government, you get people voting for more government. And so you end up with, extreme political outcomes and loss of freedoms and bigger state. And the state ultimately just consumes everything and destroys the purchasing power of the money and steals all the wealth. Like, this is not new. This has happened in like every socialist country ever. Right? And you get extreme outcomes on the right as well. It's not just the left. But you tend to get the left first because, just the natural consequences of things. more and more state intervention, more and more socialism, ultimately communism, and you destroy everything, and then you get swing back to fascism, because someone wants a strong man to come in and fix it. They're all just consequences of the money printing. So you need to opt out.
Yeah, it's frightening when you break it down and see the trajectory that the world's going on at the minute. I want to flip kind of slightly. It's similar topic, but you're UK based, Joe. I think this part of the world, I'll say in general, kind of UK, Ireland, Europe, is slightly behind. Well, way behind, I think, in the US when it comes to like it as a topic that's front of headlines and things at times. Here it's a lot. If it's a front of a headline, it's usually a negative. But there has been kind of, like, we speak to a lot of people obviously around UK and Ireland. I think it's changing the narrative, but probably not quick enough. But there has been some. Well, you were in Vegas and you seen that Nigel Farage was there and he spoke about it, and that made headlines here. So that's kind of a recent event. But what do you think? What we try and do here, and I think what your buddy was trying to do as well, is not get into the political side of things and say too much. And it's more of a ground up movement. We try and get everybody to understand it, because if everybody understands it, then it's great. You don't want kind of governments to understand this first and then get ahead of it, or large corporations and things like that. You want it kind of to be and we don't choose, again, it's a free market, how that happens. But it would be great if it was a ground up movement and grassroots movement from everyone. But there is merit in politicians having being open to it, so that they don't crush it, in a way. Not that you can, but don't slow adoption. So I know there's quite a lot of work done in Bitcoin policy UK and things like that, and I think a few of the guys there, and I think it's great work. Again, it's not our focus of it, but it's definitely respectable work that those guys do. Just in general, like, what's your kind of view on that? The kind of grassroots movement, top down from Bitcoin, and how important is it, that the politicians in UK get this right?
Well, I mean, the first thing to say is they can't stop anything. Right? This is happening whether they like it or not. It's happening whether they like it or not. What will ultimately happen, though, is everyone realizes Bitcoin is a competitive advantage. And there isn't a neutral strategy when it comes to Bitcoin. It's like gunpowder or like the internet. There's no neutral strategy. If you ignore it, you die. Right? If you ignore it, you get left behind. Right? To ignore it is to lose. To embrace it is to win. That's it. Right? And if you fight it, you lose badly. And that applies to the individual, it applies to the company, it applies to the country. And people are waking up to this fact. I mean, you can see this. We take the US as an example here, Chris. Bitcoin was Bitcoin brackets crypto was had a major impact on the last election in the US. The Democrats came out and said, we're creating this anti-crypto army under Elizabeth Warren. Doesn't win any votes. It's maybe impacts some people at the margins. But on the flip side, Trump comes out and says, I'm going to make America the home of Bitcoin and crypto. We're going to be a superpower. He wins all the votes. Right? Because people Bitcoiners are largely one-issue voters. Like, you fix the money, you fix the world. Everything's downstream of the money. So if you're dealing with anything else, it's a symptom, not the cause. Deal with the cause, the symptoms will resolve themselves. And so it's a very clear strategy now. If you're a politician, you're pro-Bitcoin. If you want to win votes, you're pro-Bitcoin. You win the entire block. And the person who's most pro-Bitcoin wins the entire block of votes. And even if it's just 2 or 3% of the population, that's enough to swing the election. Right? So you've got a playbook now in America. And so what happens is eventually everyone just figures this out. It's like there's no benefit from fighting Bitcoin politically. Even leaving aside that Bitcoin is the only way out of insolvency for nation states. It's the only way out. Right? But that comes downstream of realizing there's no political upside from fighting it. Right? So these are inevitable outcomes. It's just the UK is at the very start of that journey. But you can bet your boots, and you're already seeing this with Farage, right? You don't think Farage has looked at the US election and gone, "Oh, this seems like a no-brainer," right? Apart from the fact that he would be more aligned with freedom and self-sovereignty compared to Labour, right? But in 4 years' time, when the next election comes around, you can bet Labour is going to be pro-Bitcoin as well, because 4 years of learning this lesson even more clearly from future elections that will occur around the world, the sway that the US will bring over the next 4 years to the UK. They'll see the US actually prospering, whereas we'll see the EU go further and further towards tyranny with the introduction of central bank digital currencies and population uproar on the back of that. It's very clear to me. They can't stop it. They'll ultimately embrace it. And Bitcoin is for anyone. But I'm much more optimistic about the future, because Bitcoin is a mind virus. It's like, once you realize engaging with it is a competitive advantage, you engage with it. And then when you engage with it, you start to learn about it. And when you start to learn about it, you don't stop learning about it. And then you don't think big government's a good idea. I've never met a Bitcoiner who thinks big government's a good idea. Government's always too big. And so you end up with the whole population, increasing amount of population, thinking that the government's too big, and politicians engaging with Bitcoin come to the realization that government's too big. What happens? Government shrinks naturally. The people who vote on a bigger government ticket don't get elected. So the government shrinks. So we solved the problem, but we solved the problem gradually through education, through adoption. And so I'm really optimistic for the future, for the whole world, but at different speeds. I'm super optimistic for America. They're on the right track. Europe is absolutely on the wrong track. The UK, Europe's going towards outright tyranny under Lagarde. The central bank digital currency is just tyranny in a box. It will ultimately fail, because you can't stop Bitcoin. Bitcoin will crush it. It will push people towards Bitcoin at a faster rate, but it's going to cause a huge amount of negative externalities along the way. And the UK is trapped somewhere in between. And I suspect they'll go towards the US as opposed to Europe, try and align with Europe maybe on regulations or something like that. But ultimately, when push comes to shove, we'll go with America, I'm sure.
Yeah. We kind of have this conversation back and forth between myself and Alan and some of the guests we have on as well, of what brings people to Bitcoin the most. Is it that education? Is it curious people want to get into it, and as you say, maybe engineering background, finance background that is curious about it. And again, we try and educate. You try and educate as many people as possible, and that is the life raft that people want to. We want to get people on board, but there is a feeling there's going to be a part of the world, I just don't know where, certain countries, certain regions that are going to find Bitcoin through pain, and that's not what you want. But that's inevitable. What's going to happen if you don't go along with it? Again, hopefully everyone does eventually, but there's going to be pushback from certain governments, and that's going to be in the history books, what not to do, when a playbook and when new technology like this comes along. And obviously the lessons of fiat money are going to be learned through this. But yeah, I do have a feeling, I just don't know where the UK fall, whether they're going to feel the pain and it's going to go too far, they're going to resist, or someone is going to enable this, whether it's some celebrity, some politician, for the mass majority, or again through education, like what we're doing here as Bitcoiners.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the UK is out of sync with America on election cycles. So we have another 4 years of socialism, right, which is just a disaster, because it just leads to more and more government intervention in the free market. Yeah. I mean, it is a disaster, and it might feel like I'm picking on the left as opposed to the right, but that's just where we are. But socialism only ends up in one place, and that's poverty, right? And authoritarianism, and it's authoritarianism that we need to be mindful of here on both ends of the spectrum. It's really tough. It's really tough. We don't have enough penetration at the moment in the UK from a mainstream perspective, a mainstream Bitcoin perspective. Bitcoin Policy UK and Bitcoin Collective with Jordan Walker and the guys are doing great stuff to educate people and educate businesses, educate politicians, but it's a slow grind. It's a slow grind. We now have potentially a small breakout piece of momentum with Nigel Farage putting it at the top of the ticket, but there's no, given 4 years to the next election, it's not necessarily going to force anyone's hand into doing anything from a governmental perspective, and there's just a sheer lack of education on the government's perspective. The biggest risk here for the UK is that we sell the Bitcoin to pour into the black hole. Sell the only absolutely scarce thing in the universe for something we can print ourselves. That's what we're likely to do, assuming we haven't already lost the keys, which is a non-zero probability. So, there's a small group of us trying to educate people, reach out, but you can't force anyone. You can't force anyone. I'm hopeful we will end up having these mini breakouts where people who have a following or can drive awareness find Bitcoin, because it needs to be a grassroots movement in the UK when the FCA and the Bank of England, when the government are either absolutely against it or willingly not engaging. You need to educate the public so that they start to care about it at the ballot box. Right? And we've got some years to do that now, and we've got some momentum. And the thing I take comfort in is that once the penny drops, you never go back. And so everyone's going to get there. It's just about how do we minimize the amount of pain we go through before we reach that tipping point.
I think you obviously you put in a lot of time and energy and effort into this, because we were talking there a few nights ago to the Bitcoin Chef. I think you're doing an event in Bury St Edmunds. Is that correct?
Seeing Henry at the end of the week.
Yeah, Henry. Yeah, but even from your point of view, your schedule, you're obviously you're attending the big events, small local meetups, group meetings. Where do you get the time to do all this? Or do you have the luxury of having the time to do all this?
Well, I'm in the fortunate position is that I've worked hard for many years and grew a business, and now I can focus all my time on Bitcoin and Bitcoin related stuff. So all my working focus is entirely Bitcoin, and so I try to say yes to as much as possible. If people wanted me to join a podcast, want me to go to a local meetup, want me to go to Las Vegas, I'll do all of those things, because it's important we just educate people.
Yeah.
Because once you see it, you can't see it again. So we just need to make sure everyone sees it. It's a long journey. It's a long journey. But yeah, just grateful to be invited on to podcasts like this. So thanks, guys.
No, it's wonderful. And so obviously we're lucky to have you in the space, just with the amount of work you're doing, and with the resource. What's the problem? The video. Have you plans to expand that? Do something on top of it, or obviously the resource itself. You're obviously accepting people coming on board and actually presenting it themselves within their local communities, and that kind of stuff. Would you encourage anybody to really take that up, take the reins on that, and go
Absolutely.
Forward? Yeah.
Absolutely. So the video is open to everybody. And so it's open on a Creative Commons non-commercial license for all the materials as well. So it means, I want everyone to take it, present it, iterate it, change it, do whatever you want, as long as you don't sell it. Right. And so this is something for the community. And since launching, we've had hundreds of Bitcoiners get involved, doing translations and helping with videos and all of these things. So on the website, and perhaps you guys could pop a link below wherever we post this, to satsversusfiat.com. There's also what'stheproblem.org, which we've now got the handle for, which is probably where it should have lived the whole time. But we can put both links under the thing. But in there, you've got the slides. So for English, you've got the slides, the speaker notes, and the transcript. And then you've got 25 other languages. So you've got the slide deck in, Spanish and, some very, very unusual languages as well, because it's just Bitcoiners getting in touch saying, thanks for making this. Can I translate it into my own language? And then so we've set up, I've had Jaime working with me for the last few months. So we've got, infrastructure set up now that we can help them process these, keep up the quality level. And we've done so 25 full sets of materials that hopefully people around the world then take and go and present to their local communities, because showing a video is not always the best thing. So you can get it into schools and universities, present it to a small group of friends, whatever. And then on the video itself, we've got 45 languages, native translations on the English video. And then we have 8 or 9 full remakes of the video in native languages. So there's like German, Korean. Korean's a big one. So it's someone speaking Korean, and all the slides in the video are in Korean. And so, we're putting more out all the time. But this is all community driven stuff. It's turned into a bit of a movement to help people around the world, which is, I could never have imagined having just created the video in the first place, hoping someone would watch it. So I'm very grateful to all the Bitcoiners around the world who have helped and supported and shared, because, we've got 8 billion people we need to get across this.
No, I think it's required. It is necessary, and it's an amazing resource to share for anybody and for any individual who wants to know about Bitcoin. That's the first port of contact that I would recommend at the moment in sharing out. But yeah, Joe, fantastic having you on. Chris, do you want any other questions to ask Joe before we let him go? Because
no, I enjoyed that conversation, and again, it's striking a chord, I think, with a lot of people, and understanding what the problem is. But yeah, we will push people towards the video. Obviously, share the links. Must check out the new site as well that you have there.
All right.
But yeah, no, just enjoy that. No questions, just a comment to say, keep up the great work, and it's great to see the community get involved. Like that's one of the biggest things. Like, we were at a conference in Ireland a couple of weeks ago, and the community is unbelievable. Like, so willing to help out, and amongst Bitcoiners, and yeah, it's phenomenal. Like, I'm sure you've seen it throughout Vegas and beyond, and over your time in this space. But yeah, that's one of the strongest things, and to see people creating stuff, for free to give out educational pieces is phenomenal. Like, I don't think there's many communities like that about.
There's not, but it's because it's so important. It's the one thing we're all on the same team for. Right? Just not enough people know it.
Yeah.
Perfect. No, that's perfect, Joe. Really appreciate your time. And I say we'll obviously drop the links below the video and the podcast episode. Best place for people to follow you, X or?
Yeah, I'm at SatmoJoe on X, SatmoJoe, and it's Sats versus Fiat across all the platforms, X, web, and YouTube channel.
Perfect. Good stuff. No, really, really, real pleasure having you on, and appreciate your time. Is there any final comment message you want to leave with anyone? I think you've finished it up pretty well there with your last comment. But anything in addition, feel free to go for it.
I would just love everyone to watch it. So if you haven't seen it, please watch it. And if you've watched it, share it with as many people as possible. That's it. And if we can get Conor McGregor to watch it, and then he shares it with all of Ireland, that would be a major win.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely have to share this with him and push him towards it from this point onwards. But again, thank you very much for your time, Joe. Appreciate you having you on
Thank
here.
you, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Talk soon.
Really enjoyed that.
Cheers.
Thank you.